like you, I'm talking about deer hunting now. I mean, people are going to be listening to this thinking, well, why is he talking about deer hunting? This is a fly fishing show. But for me, it's like something I enjoy.
Yeah.
And even though I'm not going to talk about it for, the next 20 episodes, it's still fun to talk about.
It's all connected, and you don't see it any better than when you're drifting the river in October and you pass a deer camp and those guys have their fly rods leaning against the juniper tree. You know?
That's it. That was Gary Lewis talking about casting and blasting. This is episode number 49 of the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show.
Welcome to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show, where you discover tips, tricks, and tools from the leading names in fly fishing today. We'll help you on your fly fishing journey with classic stories covering steelhead fishing, fly tying, and much more.
How's it going, everyone? Thanks for stopping by the Fly Fishing Show. In today's episode, I interview Gary Lewis, host of the TV show Frontier Unlimited and author of a bunch of fishing and hunting books and articles. We talk about the Pursuit Channel, how to hunt blacktail deer, and fishing Chile and around the world. Gary shares a bunch of tips around hunting deer and upland game birds, along with a couple of cool steelhead stories. Don't miss this one as Gary talks about the MacNab Challenge, where chuckers, steelhead, and deer are all wrapped into one big outdoor challenge in one day. Before I get into the episode today, I wanted to take a quick break to thank our sponsors. Ascent Fly Fishing has a special event during the holiday season called Fishmas. You get 25 to 75% off all flies of selected categories each day during the 12 days of Fishmas starting on December 6th. Go to ascentflyfishing.com to find out more. That's ASCENT flyfishing.com. So, without further ado, here's Gary Lewis from GaryLewisOutdoors.com. How's it going, Gary?
It's going good, Dave. Thanks for checking in with me.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on in the little bit of the short notice. This was awesome. We connected. Kind of a cool story we'll get into in a little bit about how I connected with you. But I know you do a lot of hunting and fishing, and you have an outdoor show. You're a writer. You've got a lot of stuff going on. Maybe you could just talk a little bit about a lot of people in the audience here are fly fishermen and anglers and things like that. Maybe you could talk about how you got into fishing and fly fishing.
All right. Well, I couldn't help getting into fishing. I grew up in the Northwest on the Kalama River, on the North Fork Lewis, and then lived on the Columbia. So Kalama, Washington, and Vancouver, Washington. But I think the fun thing for me was how I got into fly fishing. And it was on a Sunday after church, and I was 12 years old, and I really was bothered by this question of, did I want to become a fly fisherman? And so I went down to the little pond on our little creek that was in the neighborhood, and I sat there, and I'm looking at this pond, and that's just what I'm thinking about is, do I become a fly fisherman? And I see a miller moth comes bopping along the top of the water. And I just said a quick little prayer. I said, Lord, if you want me to be a fly fisherman, send a trout to eat that moth. And this trout comes up and gulps the moth off the surface of the water. And I thought, oh, man.
There you go.
I am a fly fisherman. And I had $36 that I'd saved from mowing lawns. And I went down the next day and I bought my fly rod.
No kidding.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And now, just for time-wise, what year is this?
Well, let's see. If I was 12, that would have been 1979.
Okay. Yeah, 79. Cool. So, right, yep. I just like to put in perspective because I've had a number of guests on from, we talked a lot about steelhead early on and getting into some trout. And it's always interesting to think, okay, you're 79, where are you at in the fly fishing? And there was a lot of stuff going on in the 70s and 80s, a lot of new lines coming out. And do you remember, I guess you probably just got a normal trout setup.
I bought the best fly rod that I could buy with $32. That's how much the rod cost me. And it was a Wallace, which I think was made in Longview, Washington. It was a lot like the Fenwicks of the day.
Oh, yeah.
And this was a fine glass rod. And graphite was still coming onto the market, so glass rods were the standard of the industry, and I bought a 7-weight, and it was a great rod to learn with, and I caught a lot of fish with it.
Nice. And then basically, yeah, you get started back then, and like, how do you bring that all the way up to now where you have, a TV show, and maybe you talk a little bit about how you got to where you are now and the stuff you have going.
I used to work in electrical design, and every day I'd ask myself, how do I get out of this? And one day I got an article published, and it was actually a bow hunting article, and a check came in the mail, and I thought, all right, now I see a way. And it took me from that point, from the time I decided I wanted to be a writer, it was 10 years till I could do it full time.
Wow. And so in those 10 years, you pretty much, I mean, we've heard some stories here on, I had John Gierach on. He was talking about a little bit on his story. And what were those 10 years like when you went from where you knew, okay, I can probably do this, and then to where you were actually full time? What was that whole period like?
Those were great days, because I moved to Central Oregon, and every day, even though I was going to work every day, I felt like I was on vacation. And eventually, though, I worked 3 full-time careers simultaneously to get to the point where I could stop 2 of them and let writing pay its way, and that was in 2002.
Okay. Yep, 2002. Nice.
Yep.
And yeah, it's interesting. I was actually just talking to a writer from ESPN this week. We were just chatting about some other stuff relating to the show, and it was I love hearing this. I just talked to another guy who, a kid is 17 years old down in California, and he's talking about how he's working in a fly shop and he wants to get into it. So I love hearing the stories, because it lets people know that, if you want to kind of go into, what you're doing, it's possible. You just kind of have to focus on it and go for it. So, definitely love that story. Well, now maybe talk about your TV show just before, so we don't miss that. What's the name, and what do you cover there?
Our television show is called Frontier Unlimited, and over the years I've had 2 other names for the show, but we try to tell stories in the context of the hunt and fishing, and so we go wherever I'm interested in going, and we try to find the stories from there and then tell them while we're fishing or hunting, and it's all about the story for us.
Okay, and how do you choose the stories you're going to do? You just kind of something that looks good and you kind of go for it, or how does that process work?
Well, I start from the place where steelhead fishing is my favorite fishing, and deer hunting is my favorite form of hunting.
Nice.
So wherever that will take us, then that's where we go. So that could be New Zealand. It might be Goldendale,
Yep.
The Klickitat River. And we try not to spend a lot of time in any one place.
Okay.
We do have favorite places though.
Gotcha. No, so this is targeted. Yeah. So steelhead, I mean, definitely a lot of people that listen to this are steelhead fishermen. And then the deer hunting is something I'm kind of, that's something I'm interested in, and I've been deer hunting. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, both deer hunting and fishing. And we're going to talk a little bit about this. I guess it's an English kind of this trifecta thing we're going to chat on. But before we get there, I wanted to tell a little bit of the story about how I found you, because I think it's pretty awesome just to show you, the fly. So I found you, I was searching, I had interviewed Frank Moore when we were, great interview with him. And he said his favorite pattern, I asked him in the interview, was the skunk, old school pattern. And I was just kind of searching up stuff for skunk, kind of trying to get the history, and your article popped up, and it was perfect. I was like, oh, here's this person talking about the history of the skunk. And anyway, so yeah, I was like, just kind of connected with you. And then I was like, wow, you're in Oregon as well. So over in Bend. and I just kind of connected with you, and it just kind of kept rolling along. Like everything, we had similarities. So I love that story. And for the fly fishing, so you've done a little bit of fly fishing.
Fly fishing, yeah. I fish and hunt 80 to 100 days a year, and it's mostly, when I'm fishing, it's mostly fly fishing. Okay. And it has been that way since I was 12. And living over here, I've trout fished more than anything else. And this year I accomplished the Utah Cutt Slam, catching 4 subspecies of cutthroat on a fly.
Nice.
And yeah, fly fishing is a major part of what consumes me.
Perfect. Well, we'll talk a little more about fly fishing, and I've talked about the Cutt Slam, and I think there's one they're trying to create in Oregon as well. I think I'm not sure if it's a cutthroat as well, but yeah, that's a cool little program, getting people out, trying to think more about catching multiple species and not necessarily just trying to catch a ton of one, right? That's the idea. Yeah. So I wanted to, like I mentioned, get into the talking about the cast. Well, we joke about it. We have a trip coming up we call the Cast and Blast. It's like a deer hunting and steelhead trip.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a joking thing, but we do usually get out there and do some steelhead fishing and deer hunting. I wanted to check with you. You mentioned, I've never heard of this before, but what is the program called in, I guess it's over in the UK, where they add, it's not only hunting and fishing, but it's bird hunting as well.
So this isn't any sort of a program. It's a tradition out of Scottish literature, out of the Highlands, from Scotland. And it really comes out of fiction. A novelist named John Buchan, who was also a politician, and I might be pronouncing his name wrong, but he wrote a novel called John MacNab. And it's a fun novel, no murders, it's 3 bored men who were, have reached the pinnacles of their careers, and they want a challenge. They want to go find something to challenge their intellect. And so what they do is they turn to poaching, and they send letters to these landowners and say that they're going to poach on their land and take a trophy, and then see if they can do that without being caught. So these people are forewarned, and they try to catch these guys, and we can't do that. Obviously, we're not advocating poaching. So what the MacNab has developed into, and it was kind of popularized by my late friend Ed Park here in the West, but the idea is to take a deer, a bird, and a partridge on the wing, and a fish on a fly. So if we were going to try to accomplish this in Scotland, we would hunt red deer, we would hunt partridge, and we would try to catch an Atlantic salmon. Mm-hmm. And nice. So we can't do that in Oregon. So the Central Oregon MacNab would be to, in one day, kill a deer, catch a steelhead, and shoot a chucker. Yep. And you have to do this between sunrise and sunset.
Nice.
So yeah, it's the Cast and Blast.
Okay, so I might, because of this, I might have to throw in the shotgun this year. I've kind of haven't done it for a while. We used to bring it because I guess we haven't seen that many chuckers out where we've been lately. But I think just because of this, I'm going to have to throw it in just in case.
This might be a better year for chucker.
Oh, really?
So I would definitely have the shotgun along.
Okay.
So when you do this, you have to ask yourself, what's the most difficult of the 3? Is it the steelhead, the chucker, or the deer?
That's a good question.
And on any given day, to me, the steelhead is the biggest variable.
Yeah.
Because you can figure out where the deer is, and it might be a specific animal or, where some bucks are hanging out, and you can figure out where the chukar are. And then, of course, you have to be a good enough shot, and we can't sluice them on the ground, so that's out. You got to shoot them on the wing, and then you got to catch that steelhead on a fly.
Yeah, this is great. No, I'm actually thinking for me, I think I'm probably more of a fisherman first. So I think for me, chukars would probably be the hardest if I just think about this week. Which is funny.
So what I would do is, if it was me, I would fish until I had the steelhead, and then boom, I'd start at daylight, and then I'd be looking for the deer, and I'd try to go for the chukar last.
Yeah,
that's how I would do it.
Yeah, me too. I'd probably do the deer first. Get up early, try to get that down by and then afternoon maybe do some chukar. No, now for chukar hunting when's the best time to find the chukar?
Wherever they are, whenever.
Okay,
so
good.
They're going to go to water at least once during the day, so they'll descend the slope or they'll find a spring, and then they're usually going to be at a certain level. But if you did get your deer, you have to try to get the rest of them in that same day, because the deer is the thing that you only have one tag for.
That's right.
So that's what can blow the thing out, is if you get the deer and then you get the chukar, but then you may not get the grab on your skunk or whatever it is you're swinging.
That's right. Okay, cool. So it would make sense to leave the deer for last then for that reason. Yeah. Okay, cool. No, this is good. I'll check back with you after the hunt here and let you know. Okay, so we got that. So that's the cast and blast. What do you when thinking about deer hunting, maybe we can just go into that first and talk about, I guess if we're talking about mule deer out here, do you have any, just generally speaking, I guess if you're over in, that Central Oregon, kind of the high desert, any tips, or what do you tell somebody who's maybe going out there for the first time to try to find a deer? Can you break it down a little bit for somebody that's new?
Yeah, the things that we do as hunters are all the same things that our kind have always done. We park in the same places, we walk the same trails, we study the same maps, and we do the exact same things. And so the deer is, it's easy for them to figure out our patterns. And especially a deer that's 5 or 6 years old that has seen it all before, he'll do the same things that he did last year to avoid us. So our tendencies are all backwards. If we go out into the deer woods or the desert or wherever it is that we're headed, we tend as beginners to try to cover a lot of ground. And so I remember days when I would hike 10 or 12 miles just looking at country and hoping to see a deer, and that is the exact wrong thing to do. You should get in one place, one good place, and let the deer move around you. Mm-hmm. And the more you move, the less success that you're going to have. And so that's why we like optics. That's why I carry binoculars on a shoulder strap, and I carry a spotting scope. I not only carry the spotting scope, I use it. Mm-hmm. And increasingly, I'm using spotting binoculars more than the spotting scope. But you have to use that. You have to use those optics, and you sit in one place and you watch. And you might be watching a big area or a small area, but you're watching a place that deer come to, and you watch a place where deer feed.
Mm-hmm. Nice. And what sort of do you have a brand or a type of binocular that you like?
Well, I write about optics, and so I write about whatever's new, and that's what I'm carrying.
Oh, okay.
And at the moment, I have a new Leupold binocular that I'm using, and I have a rangefinder from SIG, and a whiskey 5 rifle scope on my Montana rifle this time. So to me, we have a lot of good optics choices, and you go out and find what fits and use it, but use it a lot.
Yeah,
that's more important, I think, is that you just use it.
Is there a certain amount, like, do you have to spend a certain amount of money to get a decent pair of binoculars? Can you find a $400 or $300 pair sort of thing?
Yeah, we try to compensate for our impatience by buying more expensive optics, and we don't have to. There's good optics out there that you can buy at reasonable prices, and don't be suckered in by European brand names, and just go buy good glass. Try to compare it to what's in your price range. And the thing about optics is every optics purchase is a compromise, and you have to come in at whatever your comfortable price point is. As a rule of thumb, I like to think a person should spend almost as much on their optics as they do on their rifle. And but we have a lot of good choices out there. Just don't use your 20-year-old rifle scope anymore.
Yep.
You're really limiting yourself if you're using optics that are older. I say, get something modern that works for you, that fits the budget, and don't worry about the brand name as much as maybe some people do.
Okay. And on the better optics, you're going to get some that maybe bring in a little better light sort of thing. That's one feature, like low light conditions, you might get more light coming into the optics.
It makes a difference. And I've compared optics at that critical moment, that last 15 minutes of good light. And there'll be a little bit of difference between one binocular and another, and the price. I mean, there might be $500 worth of difference between the two of them.
Yeah.
And
okay.
so it does make a difference, and the processes they're using on glass now are way superior to what was being used 10 years ago.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. And getting back to some of the stuff you've done, so you've done a lot on obviously hunting and fishing. You've written a few books and DVDs. Maybe we can talk about some of the other stuff you've done out there other than the TV show.
So 16 books. The latest one is the 6th edition of the Fishing Central Oregon book. And that one, we cover 200 different waters that you can fish in Central Oregon itself. And then its companion is the Fishing Mount Hood Country book, in which we break down the waters that you fish in the Mount Hood region. So from Olali on the south side to the Columbia on the north side, and some of these lakes that you've never heard of, some creeks, and then of course the big name rivers like the Deschutes and the Sandy.
Oh yeah. Oh cool. So yeah, you definitely covering all the main areas to fish. What so you mentioned with fly fishing, that's kind of your as far as fishing, what else do you do? Some other salmon fishing and some other sort of like gear type fishing as well too? And do you write about that?
Oh yeah. Yep. I fish in whatever way I want to, whatever it is we're going for. So last week we were fishing on the Columbia for bass and walleye using spinning gear. I'm no purist, but I do love swinging a fly for steelhead, especially in November, and then dry flies, especially hopper. I love drifting a hopper, pattern over cutthroat.
Huh. That's cool.
Yeah.
So what do you have coming up with the show? Is there do you have things kind of lined out for the season, or how does the seasons work? Is this is on one of the networks out there, the outdoor networks?
Yeah, we're on the Pursuit channel. We're going to be on Wild TV in Canada. The Pursuit channel gets us to across the country in the United States and then also in the United Kingdom. We're on in 18 Russian-speaking countries in the Russian language, and you can find us on the huntchannel.tv and pursuituptv.com. So lots of different ways. In the Portland area, the show is on 4 times a week, and so there's a lot of different ways to catch it. But what we do is we shoot 13 episodes a year, and usually skewing a little bit toward the hunting side of things.
Yep, gotcha. And you have content or information shows on there for people all around the world that it sounds like you have a pretty good following. So if somebody was in Australia, you might have some stuff they would be interested in there.
Yeah, we find ourselves going to New Zealand.
Oh yeah, right.
A couple times, and so we try to shoot some episodes from New Zealand, and then we've done episodes from South Africa and also Chile, which is a fantastic destination and one that I've been to twice and I'd like to go back to.
Nice. So how do you get? How does that work with? Is that paying for the those sorts of trips? Is that kind of covered? On your own dime or the show, or how do you work that when you go head over to Africa?
We have to. We got to pay for this stuff out of our own pocket, so we can't go to Africa every year, obviously. And it'd be nice to think that the airlines would help us, but they don't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. So because there are a lot of, I was looking at just on the shows that were up with yours. There's a number of different shows out there. I didn't realize because I've kind of been more in the podcast space and haven't really been connected with TV and stuff for a while. But yeah, do you see that? Do you see the shows growing in number out there, the outdoor shows?
Yeah, so we started 10 years ago in TV, and there was a real explosion in shows like ours, the outdoor world, about that same time that we started ours. So
Okay.
We had, people that we looked to, and there really just became an opportunity out there in the outdoor networks.
So what has been the hardest thing about doing the show, would you say?
I think maybe the hardest thing about television is the people that you work with. And I've been fortunate to work with some great people. And if I had to work with some of the people that I've heard about or met over the years, I wouldn't be in television at all. But the people that I've worked with are dear friends of mine, and my current producer we've been working together for about 7 years, and he's very talented, and he's become a real successful hunter in his own right too. And so that's been fun to see that develop.
I want to take a little break for a word from our sponsors. Ascent Fly Fishing has a special event during the holiday season called Fishmas. You get 25 to 75% off flies during the 12 days of Fishmas starting on December 6th. Just go to ascentflyfishing.com to find out more. I wanted to touch briefly just on Ascent if you haven't heard from them before. They have some really cool products. You can follow them on Facebook or Instagram to get daily deals as we move through the holiday season. But one of their products they have is really cool. It's basically a selection of unique flies that are selected for your unique stream. And what they're doing over there, it's kind of this. They've got this nerdy database of basically what flies are hatching during the season, different water conditions in your stream all over the country. So they're able to make a selection for you of these patterns that meet your exact stream at the time when you want to fish it. It's a really cool deal, so check them out if you get a chance. It's something that I definitely have my box, and it's got a bunch of cool patterns in it. But just want to remind you again to head over to ascentflyfishing.com during the holiday season for this Fishmas. This is a big thing, and 25 to 75% off different categories of flies is pretty cool. And again, go to Ascent Fly Fishing. That's ASCENT flyfishing.com. Okay, back to the show. And I was watching one of the shows you had on kind of a fly fishing episode, and I think you're on up on the Deschutes, and maybe you can talk a little bit about that show and how that went. I believe it was up on the Warm Springs reservation, right? Have you done a few different shows with on steelhead fly fishing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we have over the years. And when I think about the best things, the things that I really like the best, steelhead on the Deschutes in November is high on my list. And it's not because that's the prime time. It's because a lot of people have quit by that time.
That's right.
And the weather can be fairly good. The water can be good. The fish maybe aren't as pressured then as they were in September and October.
Yep.
But I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the horses and the chucker and the trains. But I just dearly love being out there in a good set of waders and some sticky boots.
Yeah. Totally.
help me hold onto the rocks.
And a spay rod, right? You're using a spay rod out there?
Yeah. And I use a spay rod once or twice a year. I'm not always using the spay rod because I fish so many different ways, but it's really important to be out there. Sometimes even just by myself, casting and reconnecting.
Yep. What's your do you have fly patterns you use out there in November?
I don't think it matters.
Yeah.
I kind of tend to subscribe to the theory that if I get my presentation right, that I'll get the fish. When it's cold, that's when I'm more likely to use the patterns that have a little more flowing, a little bit more action to the feathers. And in the warmer time, when the water's a little bit lower and clearer, that's when I'll use a floating line, obviously, and the more sparser patterns that maybe smaller. And so nothing new, nothing out of the ordinary. And I don't have favorite patterns, but I do have colors and profiles that I'm more interested in. And I don't think I think people get a little bit too hung up on what fly to use.
Yeah, they do. They do.
But that's okay. That's all part of the game.
It is. I think some people take it to, the flies to another level of, there's some people that don't even fish. They just tie flies and, they love that. But I always love asking, just because I do have some videos and on YouTube. So I always love kind of hearing what people are using and then tying up some of those. But it sounds like for you, November, you're just fishing something a little, maybe more like an intruder or something a little more flowing, or a leech pattern, as opposed to a little tiny size 10, wet fly.
Yeah, there have been times when I'll throw all of that on its head and try to be very precise with a small fly. And I've even used the Teeny Nymph to good success in that
cool.
kind of water. Yeah,
that's right. Okay. So do you have, when you look at, your story, do you, or just your journey through this thing, do you have a story for us that helps, maybe helped you get to where you are? It sounds like you had that 10-year period where you were kind of going with it. Was there a time in there where you just realized like, you had it, or was it that first time when you made that first made some money on that article?
That was a big moment. But there's one of the magazines that I first subscribed to when I was young was Salmon, Trout, Steelheader. And shortly after I subscribed to Salmon, Trout, Steelheader, I started taking Fly Fishing the West, which has become Fly Fishing and Tying Journal. So even though I've been published in Sports Afield and Outdoor Life and national and international magazines, it was a big deal when I began to publish in Salmon, Trout, Steelheader. I mean, it was a personal big deal for me. And then they put me on the cover a couple times, and I liked that too. And
cool.
And then writing for what's now Fly Fishing and Tying Journal, that means a lot to me as well because of the thoughtful articles that I've read in those pages for decades. I like to be part of that. It's really neat to be part of that. My greatest joy right now, though, is taking my grandkids fishing. They're 3 and 5. And the 3-year-old and the 5-year-old each caught their first trout on flies this year.
Wow.
And they did it on casts they made, presentations they made by themselves, and then they landed each other's fish. They netted each other's fish. So I didn't touch the rod. I just told them what to do, and they did it. And people who are afraid of learning to fly fish should back up, kick themselves in the ass, and say, if a 3-year-old can do it, I can do it too.
That's right.
Because we get so hung up on, I'm not a good caster. Well, this 3-year-old, he's not a very good caster either, but he caught his fish.
That's right.
And casting is just a small part of it. There's the presentation and we look at the people who use the Tenkara rods.
Mm-hmm.
If they can get fish without casting, and they can, then it's not hard.
Yeah.
And I think the best time for a person to learn to become a fly fisherman is age 11. I love the 11-year-old because they're not afraid of anything.
No.
They'll become more afraid of stuff as they get older, and so expose them now. If you're 11 years old and you're listening to this podcast, go mow some lawns and get your fly rod.
That's right.
Start in.
That's right. No, that's good stuff. Yeah, my kids are about that same age, a little bit older, and we've gotten some fish. But I think that's cool to hear that on the fly and landing them. That's definitely a cool story.
We teach them catch and release, and we teach them how to clean them and eat them. And the 5-year-old, she's a girl. She's fished 20 times this year so far, and last week she said, "Can I clean my fish?" And so she cleaned the fish herself.
Oh, nice, good deal.
Yeah.
Cool. So that's an awesome story. I was kind of thinking, if you had another story, all the trips you've done out there. Do you have one story, whether hunting or fishing, that really sticks out as something that was like a memorable thing that you kind of you won't ever forget?
I can't believe that I've got to go to Chile twice. And I did it 2 years in a row and went and fished the Coyhaique River and the Rio Simpson and some lakes that they won't let me name.
Yeah.
And a fish I remember that was 26 inches long, a rainbow. He wasn't the biggest fish that I caught, but he ate both my flies. I was using a dry and dropper, a Prince Nymph, beadhead Prince Nymph under a beetle.
Yep.
And I cast, and I saw the beetle shake. And instead of setting the hook like you normally would, I didn't. and the fish comes up and eats the beetle.
No way.
So when I set the hook, I had both flies in his mouth. He ate the dropper and then he ate the dry. And he had the lower jaw on this fish was 2 inches longer than the upper.
Jeez.
So it was very old, interesting looking fish, and he fought hard. And that was one of those dry fly moments that I won't ever forget. But just the fact that I got to go to Chile, I would really highly recommend that as a thing to put on the bucket list.
Yeah. What do you think, other than the fishing, what did you love most about being down there?
The people were really friendly, genuine. The food was fabulous. The roads are very narrow. It's like, some people say I wasn't there, but it's like 1950s Montana.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a lot of fishing opportunity, and the locals fish a little bit, but not nearly as much as we do.
Yeah. Do you see quite a bit of the kind of the U.S. Fly fishers down there? And does it seem like there's? I mean, so it's not that point where it's like crowded at all?
No, it's not crowded.
Yeah.
We fished water that is managed pretty well. Some of it private and some of it public, but we didn't bump into other anglers.
Nice. Yeah, I have a guest coming up in I guess later this year that he talked about kind of like a DIY episode, like how to DIY your way down to Argentina.
Nice.
Yeah, so I'm hoping to go into more as maybe next year, more stories of how to do some of these trips without spending breaking the bank sort of thing.
Yeah, right.
But, cool. Well, that's good. I was also thinking, on your show, what is there an episode that sticks out as like maybe one that was the most popular or you hear most about on the shows you've done?
Well, it's funny how some of the shows that I like so well maybe aren't as popular as some of the others. And the one that turned out to really get a lot of attention was hunting red stag in New Zealand. And it will get the most views in March and April because that's when people go to hunt red stag in New Zealand.
Yeah.
But at that same year, we also had released an episode of hunting black bear on the Quinault Indian Reservation. And that was a very special episode for me, and it didn't get near the views and plays, because we can chart a lot of that now with the various video on demand services that we use. And that one we called The Way of Silence, and in which I'd take a black bear in the reservation, but it was really a special thing because of the people that we spent that week with. And so I there's the ones that are special to me, and then there's the ones that mean more to the viewer.
Gotcha.
And they're not always the same.
Do you have some episodes on deer hunting, like mule deer and all that?
Yeah, we actually accomplished the MacNab that I was talking about in one episode.
Oh, cool.
Out of Eastern Washington. And on that trip, I got the deer fairly early in the morning. And then, so as I was processing that deer, I'm thinking we have all day long, and I know there's some quail here and some trout. So I called up the Fish and Wildlife office, got my fishing license over the phone, and was able to, right around lunchtime, tease up a pretty nice rainbow on a hopper out of a local creek. And then it was all day long trying to find a covey of quail. And I just kept missing. And the dog ran away. I think he was mad at me. I don't know.
Yeah.
And then one more bird got up, and I swung really hard on it and dropped it. And that completed the MacNab for us. It was a near thing, and then it was sunset.
Nice. I'll have to check that one out. So now with the MacNab, I guess it doesn't have to be a steelhead. It can be a trout, and it doesn't have to be a chucker. It's just a kind of upland game bird.
Depends on where you are, and you change the MacNab to fit your environment. So if I was in New Zealand, it would be red stag, pheasant, and brown trout. If I was in Argentina, it would be sea run brown trout and red deer and whatever kind of bird they have down there.
Yeah. Okay, no, that's cool.
Yeah.
All right. I was thinking you mentioned the salmon trout steelheader, how much of an impact that was. Well, I mean, when you first got that article, was that had you already published books by then?
Yeah, I published, yes. Yeah, I published one book a year for 16 straight years. And then lately I'm spending more time on television.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
So you said just because that was like a personal thing, getting published and getting to the cover. What was that process like, or how did you find yourself on the cover?
I think they ran out of options. I was the only one left.
Right. Well, what was the cover? You said a couple. What were the cover photos?
Yeah, they were steelhead, one from the Clackamas, 1 month, and then one from the Deschutes.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Yeah. Okay. I saw a photo on, I can't remember if it was like social or somewhere, but it was you in it was some sort of an old car floating out in the could you clarify what that was?
Oh man, it's just some of the goofy things that I get involved in. I have a friend, Chuck. He owns a company called Fish Fighter Products, and I used to restore hot rods, and we just kind of connected over old cars. And he said, well, you ought to come fish with me in my car. He said, I have an Amphicar. And so these were made in the late 50s, and they were designed to do 55 to 70 miles an hour on the highway, and then you throw a couple of levers and you can drive it into the lake. And so we did that.
No kidding.
And we drive into the lake. It is so weird. You're sitting in the passenger seat and you're driving straight down the boat ramp, and then you're in the lake.
Wow.
And
so that's crazy. This is, because it looks like and I'll put a link in the show notes at wetflyswing.com/49. I'll get a picture of that, because it looks like whatever you said, 1950s, 60s, some old car that's just floating down there. So that's kind of crazy. They had some amphibious or whatever they're called cars back in the day that.
I never thought I'd get to ride in an Amphicar, much less fish out of one. And so then here we are casting little road runners and crankbaits and catching smallmouth bass out of this reservoir of CJ Strike Reservoir on the Snake River in Idaho.
That's cool. Cool. All right. Well, let's get back to a couple on the tips again. Thinking about hunting a little bit. As I'm getting out on this trip, the MacNab is going to be hot on my mind. I'm going to be thinking about this. So like if I want to go, any other tips for finding chucker? The deer one was a good one to really, sit down and, and glass. But for chuckers, any other tips that we didn't talk about here?
I would say if you want to find the chuckers, hunt the deer and fish for the steelhead, and be watching with your binoculars for birds as while you're looking for deer. And then while you're fishing for steelhead, keep your ear tuned for that little chuck, chuck, chuck sound that they make, and get ready to put the fly rod down when you see the birds, or it can also happen while you're floating.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden the birds are right there at the river, and that's when you get out. And so I would say focus really on, while you're up there deer hunting, keep your eye out for the chucker, because they're going to be there.
Yeah. Can you shoot out of a boat?
Oh, let's see. I don't think there's any rule against. No, there's no rule against shooting out of the boat. But
I think
I would want to be on the ground if I was going to be going after chuckers.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. Nice. All right. Well, that's I'll check back with you to let you know how I do this year. So you cover a lot of gear. I haven't seen all the gear reviews you've done, but do you have, like, if you had to pick your one piece of gear that you definitely don't leave home without, separate from rifle and fishing rod?
Well, it's binoculars. I have binoculars next to me in my truck. I have binoculars on a shoulder harness, and I use those a lot. So it's the most important thing, other than the rifle and the knife, is the binoculars. And
Gotcha.
And I want to have good boots on too. I mean, that's pretty important.
Yep. Yeah. No, I am interested in the binoculars too, because I actually have a pretty shitty pair of binoculars, and I've been looking at, like, and I just haven't been pulled the trigger because I've a couple of friends have, like, the $800 ones. I've been like, well, maybe I'll find something that's not quite, and I just haven't kind of got them yet. So yeah, it is interesting to hear that maybe a little more research, I could find a pair that will do it.
It's always a compromise, but you can find what you want in your budget. That's the way I look at it, and the point is how you use them, and the less walking around you do, and the more focused in on trying to find the deer, because sometimes all you'll see is one side of an antler or the flick of an ear, and you won't see that if you're not using your optics really well.
No, you won't. That's right. What do you think is a good or a great resource for deer hunting? Maybe something online, or I don't know. Are there any good resources if somebody wanted to learn about a little more about hunting?
Oh man, this morning I found an article it must have been written by somebody in Bangladesh, and it was all about Oregon hunting. And they couldn't have had it more wrong. And so somebody online actually wrote an article about Oregon hunting. And I'm convinced they're not from this continent.
No.
And so you can find a lot of crap online. Yep. I say go to the trusted sources. There's some good books on hunting. And for the person who lives in the Northwest, our blacktail deer are the best teacher that there is. And to learn about hunting the blacktail from Boyd Iberson, who has passed away now, but he left a great book that you can still find on the web, and it's called Blacktail Trophy Tactics. Read that book. And then Cameron Haynes has a book on trophy hunting blacktail. There's several other really good blacktail books out there. And then I have a deer hunting book as well. It's called Deer Hunting Tactics for Big Game Hunters, today's Big Game Hunter. And then when you have read all of those, then you read Scott Haugen's blacktail hunting book, and it kind of ties everything together. And when you study blacktails and you become good at hunting blacktails, you can hunt any other big game on the planet.
No kidding.
Yeah.
And is that, I mean, I have heard some stories from friends that have hunted that, like in the woods, they do the thing where they, maybe like take one step and then wait for a minute as they're walking through the woods, sort of thing. Is that like a strategy, or like, why are they so challenging to hunt?
That's the classic. That's the classic way to hunt these blacktail, but it's a lower percentage way to be successful. And for me, I want to be on a high point looking down into a small opening, and a place where deer bed and where deer feed. And when I find that spot, that's the spot that I hunt. But these blacktail deer are the most challenging of the deer that I have found. And I've taken the Grand Slam of deer, and these blacktail are the toughest. And so they're the ones I am most fascinated by. And you spend the time I think you learn to hunt blacktails by reading about them and then going and applying it. And to me, it's the most exciting, funnest thing I do is try to hunt big blacktails and mule deer. And you get good at blacktails, and you're going to be really good at mule deer.
Oh, cool. And is it harder for you to shoot a blacktail or catch a steelhead on the fly?
Oh, it's different every day, but
yeah,
I every one of them is a gift.
Yep. What about fishing or hunting? If you kind of if you were forced to, you could only do one. Would you fish or hunt? What would it be?
Depends on the month you ask me that question, and here we are at the end of September, so I'm saying I'm going deer hunting.
There you go. Yeah, that's the time. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, so I think I got a couple other questions here I want to check in with you. We've kind of covered a little bit of everything here. I keep coming back to the MacNab, the trifecta thing there, because I think that's a kind of interesting story, and I love the fact that it started out as like an illegal activity. That's quite short. And now, how long ago was this? Are these guys still around?
Okay, so it comes out of fiction. So
okay,
yeah. So the novelist he created them, and
gotcha.
And that was between the world wars, and so it comes out of that genre, the frustration and fear. I think that was on the European continent and in the British Isles at that time, and so those are underlying tensions that are in the book that maybe not manifest, but you can feel them when you read that period of literature, the novels from that time.
Gotcha. Okay. And what is your plan here? I'm, thinking about, I've interviewed a few people, I had Gene Herring on with, he had a TV, he was a producer, had some fishing shows, and there's been a lot of changes, with the online changes and things like that. What do you see like yourself in, down the line going with all this stuff? I mean, are you going to keep writing, go more into TV, more, and where do you think I guess the industry is going?
I see myself as a writer first, and so we try to take the writing, to the visual medium, but that visual medium is changing, and we want to be on the leading edge of it. And so I see that as changing even year to year. But satellite TV is still the big one.
Is it?
Right now. And so we're still strong in that one, satellite and cable.
Yeah. Yeah. You still see that's still growing. Part of your audience is still growing there with the television.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. It's changed. Obviously it's changed now. It's people kind of decide when they want to watch it, but that's kind of a good thing, right? For the consumer.
Oh, I think it is. If it's good for the consumer, then the people that create better adapt.
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty much, yeah. And the podcasting thing is a little interesting too, because it's kind of given people another opportunity and given the consumer another chance to have another resource, to learn. And
oh yeah, and the more time I spend with people who are 10 years younger than me and 10 and 15 years younger than me, they love the podcasts, and so do I.
Yep.
And one of my friends told me that's what he's doing while he's glassing for deer.
Nice.
He's listening to podcasts.
That's cool. I know. The more I get into it, I started back in December, and the more you hear about stories, it's still a slow, it's just this gradual growth. It's not like a crazy hockey stick spike or anything like that. But yeah, you just hear people. I mean, I talked to this guy from Australia he left a review. He said, he enjoys the show and listens to it every week. And, he's in Australia, and I talk a lot about steelhead, and well, I guess I've talked a lot about trout, but people are just, even though they're going to do it, right? I mean, that's the plan, even though they haven't done it. And it's just a little resource and a way to connect. I mean, like you, I'm talking about deer hunting now. I mean, people are going to be listening to this thinking, well, why is he talking about deer hunting? This is a fly fishing show. But for me, it's like something I enjoy.
Yeah.
And even though I'm not going to talk about it for, the next 20 episodes, it's still fun to talk about.
It's all connected, and you don't see it any better than when you're drifting the river in October and you pass a deer camp and those guys have their fly rods leaning against the juniper tree.
Yeah, that's it.
We're all connected, and it's funny when I travel to New Zealand how the guys, they want to know about steelhead fishing.
Sure.
That I talk to down there because they hear about it, and in this global world of communications that we have now.
Yeah, no, and for me it is that. I mean, we are that camp. I've been doing this since I was 5, the same thing. And I kind of think about it because I think probably, if it wasn't for my parents, my dad especially getting me into it, which is cool because now he's going on this trip and he's going to be 80.
Yeah.
And getting him on the river isn't as easy as it used to be. But, it's just that thing. Like, I don't know if I would have been a hunter. I think fishing I'm totally, into, but the hunting thing is something like, well, I'm not sure if I would have been a hunter if it wasn't for my dad getting me into it. And I'm glad, obviously, because it is a lot of fun once you do it.
Yeah. Yep. It sure is. So. And it becomes one of those challenges that, for me at least, it's a new challenge every year. I don't sit back and think about my past successes. I just think about what's going to happen next.
Yep.
How am I going to find them this year? And I always am going somewhere else. It's always a new place. One of the things I've found is that I can look at a topo map and I can figure out where the deer live by looking at the topo map. Huh. And I can draw a spot on that map and then go there and take the buck lived on that X that I put on the topo map. I've done that year after year.
That's
after
amazing.
year.
So are you looking for, I mean, what is the secret there? Like kind of looking for, well, you're not seeing springs. Are you seeing water, that sort of thing on the topo, or how are you, is it just the contour?
It's where the water is. It's where it is in relation to the road and where their beds are likely to be in relation to the water, and it's way easier to figure out on the dry side than it is on the wet side of the mountains. But it's doable. It just takes a focus, learning how to read topo maps, learning the funnels and not only the funnels but the landmarks that I think that the animals use when they have to move from place to place, and I'll look at good deer habitat and I'll go right by it if it's flat.
Yeah.
There might be a whole bunch of deer there, but I don't want to hunt there because my style, I have to be up high, looking down into small openings. That's how it works for me.
Oh, it's cool. This is I'm going to be thinking about this because this year we had a huge fire, one of the biggest fires we've had, and it burnt a lot of the country that we used to hunt. So I think this year we're going to probably be exploring some new areas. So I might have to do a little more of looking at the topo maps as opposed to kind of just hiking up and kind of scouting. You
might find yourself looking for those green spots, the only green spots that are left, in that blackened habitat.
I know. I'm hoping that we'll find a couple of patches that'll be good to hunt. But if not, that's it's the cast and blast. So if
that's right.
If the deer hunt, we've had times, I tell you, we've had rough times with hunting over the years and fishing, but when the hunting's tough, then you still have a fishing trip, which is cool.
Yep.
All right, Gary. Well, that's about all. I've got a bunch of hunting tips. I want to pick your brain out. Maybe we could do that some other time. Maybe just let us know in the next 6 to 12 months if you have anything new coming out or what we can look for as far as everything you got going.
You got it. Thanks, Dave.
Or do you anything? Do you want to just touch on anything new you have coming out with the show or anything in the next year? or books or anything you're doing?
Our new episodes will launch in March. That's what we're looking forward to.
Cool.
Is bringing out these episodes we're working on right now.
Okay, so anything that's out there that you've already done, we can find it all online at and can we go to just GaryLewisOutdoors.com and have connections to all your stuff?
That's right.
Okay, that's
right. Yep.
All right, Gary. Well, thanks for coming on and sharing the tips and your story about what you're doing out there. I appreciate all the resources and the fly, the skunk, that from where we started. I appreciate you doing that little history of the skunk pattern, and I'll look forward to definitely looking at more of your stuff online.
The skunk is my favorite steelhead fly too, and so it was a privilege to be able to write about its origin in a way that other people maybe hadn't seen before.
Nice. All right. Yeah. All right, Gary. Well, we'll talk to you soon, and thanks again.
Thanks. We'll see you out there.
All right. See ya. Bye. So there you go. If you want to find all the show notes with all the links we covered, just go to wetflyswing.com/49. And please head over to the Facebook group where we are continuing conversation on some of these topics. Just go to wetflyswing.com/Facebook to join the tribe over there, and we'll see you hopefully then. Thanks again for stopping by to check out the show today. I'm looking forward to catching up with you soon and hope to connect with you on the river or online.
Thanks for listening to the Wet Fly Swing Fly Fishing Show. For notes and links from this episode, visit wetflyswing.com. And if you found this episode helpful, please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes.